Okay, so you're here because you're interested in our study abroad program, our being the one that we run out of New College, more specifically the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And it's the communication faculty who lead this program. However, it is quite interdisciplinary. So you don't have to, by any stretch of the imagination, be a communication major to participate in this program. So let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to try to cover today. We'll do some introductions here in just a second, and then we will move to why a faculty-directed program should be of interest to you. There are other options which we can discuss, but it's important to know what this is, and it's a faculty-directed program. Then we'll look at some information about the local destination, Barcelona, Spain in particular, specifically housing information. Students are always curious about where they would stay if they were doing the program. Academics, how the course is set up and how it progresses and how the study abroad piece features as part of the larger course. And then finally, some program highlights. If you aren't excited enough by point 6, we hope to lure you in with some specifics. So by way of introduction, I am Jeff Cassing, the faculty lead on the program. I developed it several years ago now. It's run consecutively up until COVID. We've run it consecutively annually for several years. So I like to think of it as kind of having it dialed in, if you will. And I should tell you by way of introduction, the course stems from a very personal interest of mine, which is I'm a big soccer fan. And so I put on my football club Barcelona shirt today to demonstrate that. I became a fan probably 15 years ago of the club. And the more I learned about the club and its relationship to the city and the dynamic and the history of that region of Spain relative to the larger Spanish nationalism, I started to think this is fascinating and it could make for a really interesting course. And better yet, it could make for a study abroad course. So that's how it kind of came to fruition, was through my own learning about this place and its particular connection to sport. And so that's why you have those themes mixed in, which are sport, place, politics, and identity, which I'll unpack a little further as we get into the kind of academic content of the course. At this point, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Kathy Cayetano, who will be the second support faculty member. We always bring a second person in case something happens to the first person. And it's just good to have two people on the ground to help all the students. So I'll turn it over to Kathy so she can introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kathy Cayetano, and unlike Dr. Cassing, who is a big fan of soccer, I'm a fan, but not like, I understand the game. Let's put it this way, and I enjoy watching the game. But what interests me really a whole lot about, soccer is the cultural component. My research focuses on intercultural communication and the way that, identities are built through culture. And so when he, approached me on being a part of this exciting opportunity, I saw it as an opportunity to be able to further expand my horizons on, a different angle, the sports angle, that context of sports and how identities, through fandom and as he so eloquently put, the countries that are connected to these fans, the teams, all that comes together and creates this marvelous cultural identity, that people really identify with and are passionate about. I'm looking forward to the trip and to being a part of the learning experience alongside with you. So.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Also joining us today is Celeste Yarla. I'm not going to make a mess of it. Sorry. And she is our person on the ground in the study abroad office. So I'll give Celeste a chance to just tell you who she is and what she does. Go ahead, Celeste.
Yeah, so my name is Celeste Yarla, and like Jeff said, I work in the study abroad office as an international coordinator. So I work with a lot of different programs, including this program, and then a couple of our other ones with New College as well. And I am here to answer questions, like more general questions about how to apply for the program, scholarships, that type of thing. And then also I would be the one if you do apply to the program, like sending you emails on how to apply and what the next steps are, and if we need any documentation and that type of thing. So you do hear from me throughout the process, but definitely more of the kind of admin background work of collecting all the information from our students.
Yeah, thank you, Celeste. So that's important to understand is what we cover today is really you're getting the sales pitch on the course to really get you excited about it. But in order to do a study abroad course, there's all kinds of infrastructure behind the scenes. So you're just seeing the academic side, if you will. So there's an administrative side that Study Abroad does a wonderful job with supporting the students who apply to the program, helping you get passports, helping you get the health insurance you need. All those kinds of things are taken care of if you follow the procedures and the steps. So know that while that's not on the front end with the academic side, that all does get taken care of by our fantastic support team. All right, so I see we have another student's popped in too. So we have 3 of you now. What I'd like you to do, take a beat if you need to, but introduce yourself with the basics first, name, year, and major at ASU. And then if you've got any previous study abroad experience, it'd be wonderful to hear about. And then what's your particular interest about this course? That would help us to know that. So Alejandro, I'm just going in the order that's on my screen. You're on the top.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. So my name is Alejandro Hernandez, or I go by Alex for short. I'm a history major of a comm minor, and I'm a junior.
Okay. And have you done any study abroad?
No, this will be my first trip, and I've been eyeing this trip for like a couple years now. I was just like waiting for like the right moment to take it. So.
Okay. Hopefully we can run it. You're a junior now, so we'll do it your year. Okay. We met before. I feel like maybe we met at one of the info fairs if you had a chance to see us in the past.
The last like Indian study abroad relay was the general study abroad 101 session. What's the difference between exchange and all that stuff? So that's
okay.
Kind of like my previous experience with that.
All right. And Hannah, I know you and I have talked virtually quite a bit about the program. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Hannah Mangold. I'm a sophomore and I'm a global studies major with a minor in French. I don't have any previous ASU study abroad, but my senior year of high school, I took an 8-day trip to Paris with my AP French class. And then as for the interest, as a global studies major, we are required to study abroad. And I was interested in a spring break one because I would prefer a shorter kind of trip, you know. And out of the spring break options, this one just caught my eye, especially it involving like culture and politics, because that's my aim.
Okay, great. Yeah, it would be a good fit. We've actually had several people from your program go on this particular study abroad.
That makes me happy because I was hoping, because I know I've heard they're like kind of strict on like giving the credit for the specific global studies ones. So that makes me happy.
No, we've definitely had people from that program. And I think that, as you suggested, they like the intersection of the themes in the course based on the interest they bring to it. All right, we have one other student who's at the bottom of my screen, but your name's not coming up. So go ahead and
hi.
Yep.
I'm Felice Levitt. Yeah. I'm a medical studies major, and I've never studied abroad before. I wanted to in high school, but I just wanted to join the session because I don't remember how I came across, I think an email or something, but I just wanted to see kind of what it was all about. Other than that, I kind of have no clue what's going on.
That's why we call it info sessions. You're in the right place.
Okay, cool.
Let me give you a little more background then. Dr. Cayetano mentioned her research areas, and I didn't really speak to mine, but it maybe it was implied because I built this course around my interest in sport. But sport is one of the areas I spent a lot of time doing research, and so having taught this course, it's gotten to this point which is kind of interesting and fun. I've written quite a bit academically and scholarly about Football Club Barcelona, so I now have, if you will, written much of the text that we will use in the class. So that didn't exist when we first started teaching it, but I've since kind of really been involved in some scholarship on Football Club Barcelona and its relationship to the city and to Catalonia, the region. So, all right. Let's talk faculty directed program. When you study abroad, you have a couple of different options. You could study abroad in with a group that is an international outfit that hosts study abroad programs in different countries. And so that's an option, but it's not run by ASU, if you will. So when we say it's faculty directed program, it's ASU faculty that have built it and that lead it. So that's the real difference. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both models, but understand this one is kind of in-house, built by ASU, so it's unique to us, and you would be involved in that program. What that allows us to do then is to use some of the different formats that ASU has available, one of which is called the Global Intensive Experience. So Hannah mentioned this when she said spring break. So the way the Global Intensive Experience courses are set up is really they're designed to give students the opportunity to study abroad without having to commit to that other option, which typically is a summer session or a full semester abroad. And so what I found, and this is why I love the GIE experience, because it allows a whole nother cohort of students to get involved and study abroad that wouldn't be able to say, oh, I took a whole semester. That's a real luxury. Not everybody's able to do it. Or I took a big chunk of my summer and went somewhere. So what's wonderful about the GIE courses is they're study abroad intensive. It's usually a week to 10 days, and they're dropped often at the end of the term or in midterm. So in this case, we use spring break, which works out really well. So to understand it in your larger academic picture, one of the advantages to a GIE is that it's part of your spring load. So if you're already above 12 hours on your tuition credit, you're not adding whatever you go beyond 12 hours, you're paying your standard tuition rate. So this course doesn't cost you any more in terms of tuition. Whereas if you did it in the summer, you'd be paying summer tuition, or you did study abroad in the summer. Or if you went and studied somewhere else with a different program, you'd have tuition credit that gets mixed in with how they do that. So this is part of your ASU bill, is the way to think of it. It's part of your spring load. That said, there is a course fee, which covers all the costs associated with the study abroad, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So do understand that you're not going to pay anything for tuition additionally, unless you're adding it and you're not at 12 hours. Then it's the cost of 3 hours of coursework. But there's a cost. So we'll talk about that here shortly. All right, so we do ours in the spring. The spring break is the study abroad portion of the course. And before you go, the way I've designed the course is, and this again is another advantage to doing it this way, instead of showing up in country, if let's say you're going to Spain and you're going to take a study abroad semester, you show up, you haven't done anything academically, and you start learning on the ground. And you have a couple of months to do that, which is wonderful, and you spend time there and get immersed. What's different about this approach is because it's spring break, we front load the course, or I front load the course. So all the content you need to make you proficient and understand the dynamic of what you'll be seeing and experiencing happens before you get there. So you go in comparatively very well informed. You understand the dynamic of Spain and Catalonia and the separatist movement and the politics and the role that culture and sport play and all that. So you have all the pieces and you're able to kind of connect them. And then of course, the next bullet point, that leads to a really intensive and immersive experience while you're there. So you're doing things that are built around what you've learned. And you have, again, a real kind of solid footing going into that. So you're not doing things that don't make sense to you, that are a mystery to you, that are the first time you've ever seen it. You know these experiences, and now you're getting to live them. So that's a real neat feature as well. So it's led by people that are well versed and have done this before, and it's highly structured and pre-planned when we're there for the week. Now I will say that something we've learned over the course of doing this is that students really still do, even though they're there for a week, they don't want all their time structured. So we have about, I would say if I had to proportion it out, about 50% of your time this isn't counting your evenings, this is your daytime. About 50% of your time on average daily is kind of committed to the course, meaning activities, lectures, visits to places. The rest of the time is open and free for you to explore the city and the surrounding area. So while we have you scripted, if you will, to a high degree, not entirely. So there's plenty of time to still explore too. And then lastly here, we have this amazing group of local partners we work with that not only get us connected with the major sites and experiences in Barcelona, but have a fascinating network of people that really augment what we're able to do in terms of the immersive experiences. So for example, you learn about this unique tradition in Catalonia called castellers, which is castle builders, meaning human towers. If you've never heard of it, most people haven't. And we learn all about it, we read about it, we understand the cultural significance of it. And then we get to, for example, spend an evening with a group that are the practitioners. We go and see and visit castellers. And if you're lucky, if you're fortunate enough, they'll let you participate. We've always had people participate if they're willing. You get right in the middle of a human tower and experience that firsthand. So those are the kinds of things that I argue augment this course and make it fantastic, because we work with these local partners who are able to help us access those kinds of things, which we wouldn't otherwise probably be able to. Okay, so you probably know this. Maybe we should have led with this. The course is in Barcelona, Spain. All right, so that's one of the larger cities in Spain. It has an interesting history behind it. This is when we start the course, the first thing you learn is kind of the history of the city and the region. So Barcelona is the capital of a place called Catalonia, or Catalunya in Spanish. And that is a distinct region of Spain. And there's a political dimension to it as well, because it predates Spain. So people that are from that region, called Catalans, believe and see themselves as distinct from Spaniards. Now, that's not to say there aren't Spanish people that have immigrated there. There are. So it's a cosmopolitan city. But you certainly have a cohort of folks, part of the population, that are fiercely identified as Catalan. And that's very important to them. And they don't necessarily see themselves as Spanish. So it sets up this really interesting kind of political identity dynamic. So that's why those things are in the course. So that's part of what we do. We start with looking at the culture and the history of the region and the role of the city in the region. And then we move to kind of the political dimension, how that continues to manifest currently in this current day and age. And not too long ago, I think it's 2017, that they had a referendum to vote to leave Spain. And that resulted in police violence with the police trying to shut down the voting. And so it's still very, it's not ancient history, it's recent history, it's modern history, it's contemporary. So we unpack all that as well. And then we tie in, so you have your culture, you have your identity, you have your politics. And then interestingly enough, we tie in, and this probably is my bias, but we tie in the sport piece, which is not insignificant. And that's because you have sport manifested in interesting ways. So Barcelona hosted the Olympics in 1992. And if you know anything about the Olympics, you know that's a way with opening and closing ceremonies to showcase a place and a people and a culture. And so that was the first time Catalan culture was featured to an international audience. And so sport was the vehicle to do that. At the same time, you've had Football Club Barcelona, which has become this global brand. You may have heard of it, even if you don't follow the sport. But Football Club Barcelona are known as Barca for short. Barca has become this emblematic representation of Catalan nationalism, a very important way in which Catalans show their nationalism, just like people at other nations get behind their national teams for things like Olympics and World Cups. And then finally, you have this very traditional, I mentioned the castellers, that's seen as kind of a sport, certainly a leisure activity. We also look at the sardana, which is the traditional folk dance, and we get to learn how to do that with a group that kind of keeps that tradition alive. But another piece here is bullfighting, which when you think of Spain, you might think of bullfighting. And Catalonia is one of the places in Spain that has banned bullfighting. And people make the argument that that is, yet another kind of political positioning to say we are different from Spain. We don't see that as one of our traditions. Now that's contentious because there are bull rings, or were bull rings in Barcelona. So we get to visit a bull ring, we get to experience that as well. All right, so questions about where we'll stay. We stay in what I call an upscale youth hostel. So you guys are of an age where you probably don't know what a not upscale youth hostel is, because you maybe haven't been to youth hostels before, but there was a time where youth hostels were basically like staying in a dormitory, and you probably had a shared kitchen and you had shared bathrooms. And so when I say upscale, it's still built on that hostel model. So you have shared rooms, you stay with other people. You would be staying with other people in the course, obviously. And I think this coming year, the COVID restrictions will mean that there probably will be, this is correct, I think, Celeste, and you can call me out on it if it's incorrect, but there'll just be two per room, whereas before it could have been 3 or 4. But that's a way of us keeping costs in check, because, so we don't go and stay in a luxury hotel in Barcelona. We stay in a youth hostel, but they do have great food, and it'll include breakfast. So you get a good start every morning with your breakfast. They've got some nice public spaces. This is actually a picture of one of the rooms there in the youth hostel. So it's in a beautiful part of the city known as the Gracia Neighborhood. And so that's a nice part of town to be in. And so we're easily walking distance from a lot of food options and historic sites and what have you. All right, so I started to do this a little bit on the Barcelona slide, but here's some other features of the way the course runs. And I did some of this earlier too when I was talking about the global intensive experience kind of design. So this will be a C-section course in the spring. It'll be a 3-credit-hour course. More specifically, it's run as a hybrid format. And the reason that we do that is so it doesn't compete with anything else on your schedule. So for example, Hannah, you're supposed to be in class right now, but you have to be here. So we try to put this in a way that somebody goes, oh, I can't take it because I've got my whatever class at the same time. I would hate for that to be the case. So we drop it on Friday afternoons, because heaven forbid students usually don't take courses on Friday afternoons. But of course, I don't expect you to be there every Friday, because that would be harsh. So we make it a hybrid. We meet once a month on Friday afternoons. You go off, we meet, you go off and do the month's worth of work, and you come back. And so it's kind of broken into those units I mentioned before. We do history and culture, we do politics, then we do sport. And for our final meeting, before we actually depart for Spain, we do an intensive pre-departure meeting. So you're fully versed in what to expect when you get there, what to do if there's an emergency in terms of, let's say you break an ankle, catching a curb and you break your ankle or something unfortunate like that. We have all kinds of plans in place to deal with those things. So we make sure you're ready and before we leave. So we do that too as part of our regular meetings. Then we head off to Barcelona, Spain, and that's an intensive week. And I alluded to this before, but it's a mix of lecture, experiential activities, and visits to famous sites. So to give you, well, I have another slide where it unpacks some of those, so I don't want to get too far ahead. I did mention before, there's ample free time as well. So as much as we have a lot of this scripted, as I said, there's plenty of time for you to explore independently. So if there's interests of yours that aren't things that are already pre-packaged, if you will, or part of our agenda for the week, there's by no reason things you couldn't go off and explore on your own and do on your own. And the students take real advantage of that and go off in groups and see other parts of the city and do things that aren't necessarily on the itinerary of what we have to cover for the week. As I mentioned, we're in a great neighborhood. So for example, just down the road, you can go see some of the images I've been showing you are famous landmark buildings in the city that are not far walking distance from where we're at. All right, and then the last thing that happens is you compose, so think of it this way, your final project in the class is a digital portfolio, and you're asked with the digital portfolio to take what you learned before you got there, all the theoretical and academic content we covered, and then to wed that, if you will, with what you saw and experienced on the ground. And the reason it's digital is because we want it to be mixed media. So you may have taken some video while you were there. You may have taken photos. You may have recorded people. Any number of ways in which you've captured your experience. So we're not asking you to do like a traditional journal, write things down, but we are asking you before you go to be conscientious of this final project. So you do want to document your experience while you're there, and then that turns into the content for your digital portfolio, which is meant to be kind of a reflection on your experience. So for all intents and purposes, we get back and then we only have one final meeting because of that hybrid schedule. And there's a gap for you to then work on and put together your digital portfolio. And then we meet our final time, and it's a great time because everybody gets together and shares their work and their experience. And what's neat is we've all had this common experience, but everybody takes away different parts from that, right? So if your interest was more on the politics or your interest was more focused on the sport, so people put together digital portfolios and reflect the experience as it played out for them, if you will. All right. Program highlights. I've alluded to some of these, but I will give you a list here actually. So one of the, there's two very famous people associated with Catalonia. One is Anton Gaudi. So what you're seeing in this top slide, anything with this amazing tile and these this architecture that is unusual is Gaudi work, and he has many buildings across the city, and so we see quite a few of those. The other person is Salvador Dali. He's more recent, and you may know his name, his work. He's an artist. His work is quite famous. So he has a museum of his own work that is in a city north of Barcelona. So this is our one major day trip out of the city. We go to the Dali Museum in a town called Figueres. So we spend a good chunk of the day there. And then either to or from, we stop in a Catalan village. So most of your time will be spent in the large metropolitan city of Barcelona. However, you will get this experience to see the countryside when we do that day out, and you'll see the Dali Museum, and then you'll see this really kind of quaint, historic Catalan village named Besalú. So I mentioned the bullfighting, that we study that, and then we get to go. As I said, there were several bull rings in Catalonia. Some of those have been reappropriated. We'll learn more about that when we, I don't want to teach the whole class today, but we do get to go and visit one of the still existing bull rings. It's not functioning, but it's still there, and it has this interesting little quaint museum. We get to see that. We will read about the sardana, which is the traditional Catalan folk dance. And then when we're there in country, we will have a group of folks who keep that tradition alive, do a session where they actually teach us the dance. So we have that experience. So that's an example of the immersive experience. We will get to meet and participate in the Castellers, with the Castellers, which is the human towers. Again, a unique feature to that part of the world. We'll visit the Football Club Barcelona Museum and the Camp Nou Stadium. So that's your picture at the bottom. And just some quick notes that it's the, even if you're not a fan of the club or don't know much about the sport, it's impressive because it's the biggest sports stadium in Europe. So just in and of that, in and of itself. And it's huge, and it's right in the middle of the city. So when you see it for the first time, it's kind of like seeing this monstrosity, and it's kind of suggests how important it is to the city. I mentioned Gaudi, Anton Gaudi before. One of his more famous places there is the Sagrada Familia, which you will have seen in pictures of Barcelona. You can see just the top of it here. It's still got cranes on it because it's being worked on. It's been built. It's having been built now for over a century, but it's an important part of the skyline, and it's a fascinating place to see both inside and out. So we spend some time there as well. And then lastly, there are significant sites across the city that have to do with the Spanish Civil War. And again, not to go into too much detail, but the Spanish Civil War is instrumental to understanding the relationship between Catalonia and Spain. And it's the point at which Catalonia gets kind of fully drawn into Spain as part of the nation. And the implications that are significant. So we see much of what are the remnants of the Spanish Civil War kind of dotted throughout the city. So we spend time visiting those places as well.